Westbrook Hills, a wealthy neighborhood where everything must be perfect. Lavish mansions with neatly trimmed lawns, gleaming white fences, stone-paved streets so clean you could see your reflection. And of course, a neighborhood like this couldn't tolerate anything dirty, at least in Karen Simmons' mind. A middle-aged white woman who saw herself as the gatekeeper of Westbrook Hills. She believed there were certain types of people who simply didn't belong here. And today, one of them had just shown up. Karen was standing on her porch, sipping her morning coffee and chatting with a neighbor. Suddenly, her eyes narrowed. Not far away, a black man was casually walking down the sidewalk. He wore a black hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, far too casual for this neighborhood's standards. But what irritated Karen the most? He didn't look uncomfortable. He wasn't looking down. He wasn't trying to appear harmless like other black men she had treated like dirt before. He was calm, his head held high. His eyes scanned the surroundings as if he was enjoying the atmosphere, as if he belonged here. That made Karen furious. She couldn't let this continue. She stormed toward the black man, her face twisted with anger, her sharp voice cutting through the air. "Hey, what the hell are you doing here?" The man stopped and turned to face her. He didn't look surprised or intimidated. Instead, he raised an eyebrow, more annoyed than threatened. "Excuse me, are you talking to me?" "Of course I am. I don't know who you are, but you are definitely not a resident here. Are you scoping out the neighborhood, planning to steal something?" The man chuckled softly and shook his head. "Interesting. And why do you think that?" Karen folded her arms, her eyes burning with self-righteousness. "Because I know people like you, dressed like a thug, walking around this neighborhood like you own the place. I know your kind. You're just looking for an opportunity to break into someone's house, aren't you? I'm not stupid." The man stared at Karen, his smile fading. For a moment, his gaze made Karen pause. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was disgust. "It's fascinating how quickly you can judge me, based solely on my skin color." Karen scoffed and tilted her chin up arrogantly. "Oh, please, I think you know exactly what I mean. I've seen enough of you people to know the pattern." The words rolled off her tongue effortlessly, as if this was just common knowledge, as if in her mind it was impossible for a black man to be wealthy enough to own a home in Westbrook Hills, as if she didn't even need to hide her racism. The man sighed, shaking his head. "You don't have to try so hard to make me understand your views. I've dealt with people like you my whole life." Karen's face turned red with anger. What did he just say? She couldn't let him win this argument. No, she had to make him submit. Karen took a step closer and shoved the man hard in the chest. He barely moved, more surprised than anything. Karen smirked, her voice dripping with mockery. "What now, scared? Get out of my neighborhood before I call the cops." The man took a deep breath, visibly restraining himself. But Karen wasn't done yet. She snatched the coffee cup from his hand and threw it straight into his face. Silence fell over the street. Nearby neighbors gasped. Some had already taken out their phones, recording the entire incident. The man stood still, coffee dripping from a tar and hoodie onto the pavement. For a brief moment, his eyes flashed dangerously, but then he smiled, a smile that made Karen feel uneasy. "You just made a huge mistake, Mrs. Simmons." Before she could ask, he pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hello, I need an officer at Westbrook Hills immediately. I've just been assaulted." Karen stood frozen, her mind racing. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. She was supposed to be the one calling the cops, not him. He was supposed to be the one afraid, the one running away in humiliation. But now he was calmly calling the police while she stood there, feeling an icy chill run down her spine. He knew her name. How? Who the hell was he? 10 minutes later, the sound of sirens echoed through the neighborhood. A police car pulled up, its flashing lights reflecting off the pristine houses of Westbrook Hills. Karen immediately rushed forward, playing the perfect victim. "Thank God you're here. He attacked me." Two officers stepped out, Sergeant Daniels and Officer Miller. They glanced at Karen, then at the black man, who remained calm, standing his ground. Karen pointed at him dramatically, her voice rising in fake distress. "He pushed me! I almost fell! I feel completely threatened. Sergeant Daniels raised an eyebrow. He pushed you? I was terrified. I have no idea what he was planning to do to me. But instead of immediately handcuffing the man as Karen expected, Sergeant Daniels turned to him, his voice level. Mr. Bennett, would you like to press charges for assault? Karen's blood ran cold. Wait, what? The man's name was Bennett? And the officer just called him Mr. with respect, like he was someone important? Karen's eyes darted to the man. He offered a small, almost amused smile. Yes, I think I would. Karen felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. No, this wasn't happening. She couldn't let this happen. She immediately switched tactics, her voice trembling with fake remorse. Mr. Bennett, I didn't know who you were. If I had known you were a new neighbor, I never would have reacted this way. This is all just a misunderstanding. Bennett crossed his arms, studying her. Silence. And that silence suffocated Karen more than anything else. She turned desperately to the officers, her voice pleading. Listen, I was just trying to protect my neighborhood. A man walking around in a hoodie looks suspicious. Don't I have the right to be concerned? Sergeant Daniels exhaled sharply, his tone turning cold. Protecting your neighborhood by shoving a legal resident and throwing coffee in his face? Karen swallowed hard. No one was defending her. Even the neighbors who had once supported her were silent. They didn't want to be associated with her. Karen felt panic creeping up her spine. She needed to get out of this, somehow. Officer Miller turned to Bennett. Mr. Bennett, how would you like to proceed? Karen held her breath. If he let it go, she could still salvage this. But then Bennett smiled again, cold, deliberate. I'd like to file charges for assault, harassment, and false accusations. Karen's mouth fell open. No, he couldn't do that. Wait, no, she stammered, looking around for anyone to help her, but no one did. Officer Miller sighed and stepped forward. Mrs. Simmons, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Karen stumbled backward, panic surging through her. She couldn't be arrested. But before she could protest further, the cold steel of handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Gasps rippled through the watching neighbors. Some recorded on their phones. Others whispered among themselves. Karen was dragged toward the police car, her screams echoing through the street. I'm innocent. I was protecting this neighborhood. This is a setup. I'll sue all of you. The car door slammed shut, silencing her. Marcus Bennett stood with his arms crossed, watching. She thought she could destroy him. But in the end, she was the one who lost everything. The video of her arrest spread across social media like wildfire. National news outlets covered the story. Hashtags like #Karen got arrested and #Justice for Marcus trended everywhere. People weren't just outraged at her racism. They were disgusted by her arrogance. Within 48 hours, people had dug up everything about her. They found her workplace. They found old Facebook posts filled with hate speech that had gone unnoticed before. And they didn't let her off the hook. Her company fired her immediately for damaging their reputation. Then a few days later, she received a letter from the Homeowners Association, HOA. She read the words, her vision blurring. You are hereby requested to vacate the Westbrook Hills community within 30 days. Her heart stopped. They were evicting her? She scanned the bottom of the letter, and her stomach dropped when she saw the signature. Marcus Bennett, the man she had humiliated and attacked, had just signed off on her removal from the neighborhood she once ruled. Karen wanted to scream, to fight back, but she knew she had already lost. Karen Simmons was humiliated, arrested, mocked, shamed. The entire internet was laughing at her, but she refused to go down without a fight. She had spent years controlling this neighborhood, getting her way, making people fear her, and she wasn't going to let some nobody take that away, so she made a plan. If Marcus Bennett thought he had won, he had no idea who he was dealing with. After posting bail, Karen spent the night scrolling through her phone, seething with rage. Every comment, every meme mocking her made her blood boil. But she wasn't just angry, she was plotting. Marcus had taken everything from her, her reputation, her job, her home. It was time to return the favor. She started making calls, reaching out to old friends, people in high places. Surely someone would be willing to help her take him down. She needed dirt, anything. And then she found something, an anonymous post on a local forum claiming that Marcus Bennett had once been involved in a shady business deal. No real evidence, just rumors. But Karen didn't need proof. She just needed to spread the right story and let the internet do the rest. Karen crafted the perfect narrative. She created fake accounts, spreading concerns about Marcus. She reached out to local reporters, feeding them lies about how he bullied residents, how he abused his position in the HOA. She even went on a live stream, crying fake tears, claiming she was the real victim. I was just trying to protect my neighborhood, but now my life is ruined because of him. He's not the man you think he is. She knew how to manipulate people, and for a moment it seemed to work. Some people online started questioning Marcus. Some even wondered if Karen had been treated unfairly. Karen smirked. She was winning, but what she didn't realize was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her life. What Karen didn't know was that Marcus wasn't just sitting around, waiting for her next move. He was already ahead of her. While she was busy spreading lies, he was gathering real evidence, real witnesses, real testimonies. Karen had spent years terrorizing people in this neighborhood, and now all those people were ready to speak out. It started with an article. A local journalist exposed Karen's history of harassment, how she had falsely reported black teenagers, how she had bullied a single mother into moving out, how she had even tried to block a Latino family from buying a home. Then came the lawsuits. Former neighbors came forward, suing her for defamation, harassment, and emotional distress. Her bank account, drained by legal fees, her reputation, completely destroyed. And the final blow? Marcus Bennett filed a restraining order against her. She was officially banned from going anywhere near Westbrook Hills. She couldn't even drive through the neighborhood she once ruled. Karen had tried to ruin Marcus, but in the end, she was the one who lost everything. And this time, there was no coming back. Karen Simmons thought she could fight back. She thought she could destroy Marcus Bennett, but instead she had only dug herself into a deeper grave. Now she wasn't just the most hated woman in her neighborhood, she was the most hated woman in the country, and the nightmare was far from over. Karen's smear campaign had backfired spectacularly. Instead of ruining Marcus, she had only exposed more of her own crimes. The news picked up on her past offenses, digging through years of HOA complaints, lawsuits, and harassment reports. Every racist comment, every malicious action, everything came to light. Karen had nowhere left to hide. She couldn't walk into a grocery store without people whispering behind her back. She couldn't log on to social media without seeing a new meme about her downfall. She had become a living joke, a cautionary tale, a walking, breathing example of karma in action, and it was only getting worse. After losing her job, Karen frantically applied for new positions. Retail, customer service, even janitorial work, anything that would keep her afloat. But every employer recognized her name, and none of them wanted the PR disaster of hiring her. Her bank account, once comfortable, was bleeding dry from legal fees and unpaid bills. And then came the final humiliation. She couldn't even afford her rent anymore. With no other choice, she packed up what little she had left and moved into a dingy, rundown motel on the outskirts of town. No more Westbrook Hills, no more luxury, just a tiny stained mattress in a room that reeked of regret, and a future that looked as bleak as the flickering light bulb above her head. One day, while sitting outside her motel room, Karen heard a familiar voice. She looked up, and her stomach dropped. Marcus Bennett, standing right in front of her, still successful, still powerful, still untouchable. While she sat in the dirt, a shell of the woman she once was. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. He handed it to her. Karen hesitated before glancing down at it. It was a flyer for a local community service program. A rehabilitation program for people who had lost everything, a chance to rebuild. Karen's hands trembled. "You think I need charity?" Marcus shrugged. "I think you need a reality check. And maybe a second chance. Karen stared at him, searching his face for any sign of mockery. But there was none. No hatred, no revenge. Just pity. The same pity she once had for the people she looked down on. And somehow, that was the worst punishment of all. Karen Simmons never thought she'd fall this far. A year ago, she had everything. A beautiful home, a respected reputation, power over her community. Now she was nothing, living in a rundown motel, jobless, friendless, a national disgrace. But maybe, just maybe, she could change. Marcus Bennett had offered her a lifeline, a chance to start over. The question was, could she take it? Karen stared at the business card Marcus had given her. It led her to a local community service center, offering job training, therapy, and rehabilitation for people who had hit rock bottom. She hesitated before stepping inside. The receptionist, a young black woman, looked up and smiled. "Welcome to New Beginnings. How can I help you?" Karen forced herself to swallow her pride. I need help." The words felt foreign on her tongue, but for the first time in her life, she meant them. She attended therapy sessions. She took job training courses. She even volunteered at homeless shelters, serving the same people she once thought were beneath her. And slowly, painfully, she started to change. But the past doesn't just disappear. One day, a woman walked into the shelter where Karen was volunteering. She locked eyes with Karen and froze. Karen recognized her immediately. It was a woman she had harassed years ago. A single mother who had moved out of Westbrook Hills because Karen made her life miserable. The woman's expression hardened. "You don't get to pretend like you're a good person now." Karen felt the weight of those words crush her. She wanted to say she had changed, that she was trying. But could she really blame anyone for not believing her? She had spent years being cruel. A few months of redemption wouldn't erase that. For the first time, she truly understood. Some damage can never be undone. Despite everything Karen pushed forward, she found a small job as a receptionist. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something. She attended every therapy session, confronting the person she used to be. But the biggest test came when she saw Marcus Bennett again. He had stopped by the community center, checking in on a donation project. Karen hesitated before walking up to him. "Marcus?" He turned, raising an eyebrow. She swallowed hard. I wanted to say thank you for not destroying me when you had the chance, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve one." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I didn't do it for you, Karen. I did it because people like you need to see what it feels like to start from the bottom." Karen's heart sank. He didn't forgive her, and maybe he never would, but she didn't expect him to, because the truth was, forgiveness wasn't something she could demand. She just had to keep proving she deserved it. Months turned into years. Karen never returned to the life she once had. She would never be rich again, never be admired, never be powerful. But maybe that was okay. She had spent her whole life thinking she was better than others. Now she was just another person trying to survive. And that was the real punishment. Not prison, not financial ruin, but knowing she would always be remembered as Karen Simmons, the woman who destroyed her own life. 10 years had passed. The world had moved on. But Karen Simmons? She could never escape her past. Her name was no longer trending on social media. No more viral videos, no more news stories. But the stain of what she had done never truly faded. Every time she filled out a job application, every time someone heard her name, there was always a flicker of recognition. Some people forgot, some forgave, but most never did. And Karen had accepted that. Karen now lived in a small town far from the city where she once reigned. She worked at a local diner as a waitress, something she never would have imagined doing in her past life. She made just enough to pay rent, keep the lights on, and put food on the table. Nothing luxurious, nothing extravagant, just simple. And maybe that was all she deserved. She no longer demanded respect, no longer looked down on others. She had spent too many years thinking she was better than everyone else. Now she was just another face in the crowd. One evening, as Karen wiped down the diner counter, the bell above the door chimed. She turned to greet the customer. and froze. Marcus Bennett, still successful, still composed, still carrying himself with quiet authority. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marcus took a seat at the counter, setting down his phone. Karen swallowed hard and walked over. "What can I get you?" Her voice was steady, professional. She had no reason to expect kindness, no reason to expect anything at all. But Marcus just smiled. "I'll take a coffee, black." Karen nodded and poured the cup. She expected him to leave it at that, to drink his coffee in silence. But instead, he looked at her, his expression unreadable. "How's life treating you, Karen?" Karen hesitated. She could have lied, could have told him she was doing great, that she had moved on, that none of it mattered anymore. But she didn't, because the truth was, she didn't need to pretend anymore. "It's different," she admitted, "but maybe that's a good thing." Marcus nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. He didn't say anything else, and for once, Karen didn't need him to, because this wasn't about forgiveness. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was simply life, a new chapter, one she had to write for herself. Marcus finished his coffee, left a tip on the counter, and stood up to leave. Before walking out, he turned back one last time. "Take care, Karen." And just like that, he was gone. Karen stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty cup he left behind. She would never get back the life she had before. She would never be respected the way she once was. But maybe that was okay, because sometimes the best thing you can do is simply move forward, even if the past never truly lets you go.